Breaking news tonight to tell you about Ray Rice has appealed his indefinite suspension by the NFL over that caught on tape video that showed him knocking out his then fiancee with one punch. Meanwhile, there's growing anger over the Adrian Peterson case of child abuse, a child abuse scandal. Now, Minnesota Governor Mark Dayton released a statement that reads in part like this. He says, whipping a child to the extent of visible wounds, as has been alleged, should not be tolerated in our state. Therefore, I believe the team should suspend Mr. Peterson until the accusations of child abuse have been resolved by the criminal justice system. Adrian Peterson has been dropped by one of his largest sponsors, Castrol Motor Oil, and NFL sponsor Anheuser-Busch is expressing concern over how the league is handling all of its domestic abuse allegations. So joining us now to talk about it is Dr. Harold Koplowitz, president of the Child Mind Institute, and Asadah Kirkland, author of Beating Black Kids, and Van Jones, co-host of CNN's Crossfire. I want to start with you, Asadah. I mean, just the name of your book, Beating Black Kids. Do you think it's such an issue that you had to write a book about it?
But of course, in the black community, beating our children seems to be some cultural norm that we even brag about. You hear a lot of black comedians brag about it like as if it's the powerful thing to do, but it's actually the thing that's debilitating us, and it's a cultural epidemic in that you find it in our community more than anybody, and it just shapes everything that we do. Do
you believe that, Van?
Well, the numbers bear out a lot of what she's saying. The African-American community is 80% in support of corporal punishment. However, the white community is 70% in support of corporal punishment. Born-again Christians are 80% supportive, but non-Christians are 65% supportive of corporal punishment. In other words, we live in a society where the majority of all races, the majority of all regions support corporal punishment.
But does that make it right, Van? Does that make it right?
It doesn't make it right. Doesn't make it right. Doesn't make it right. But stay with me, though. If we're going to make a change, we have to make sure that we don't pretend that it's only a black issue, number one, and we have to begin to understand where this stuff comes from. Listen, I don't believe in corporal punishment. I don't use it on my kids, but I'm trying to understand where it comes from.
Dr. Koplowitz, we have been talking about this. Hold on, I want to ask Dr. Koplowitz, because we've been talking about this so much in our staff meetings and our editorial meetings, and even Don has been offering his childhood experience, and there are some people, Don included, who think that corporal punishment or being spanked helped them stay on the straight and narrow. That's what Adrian Peterson said yesterday. He said it kept him off the streets, but you say that it's always wrong. So how can you say that?
So let me make it very clear. There is no evidence that corporal punishment is effective as a parenting tool. And it doesn't make a difference if you're black, white, Hispanic, if you come from the north, the south, you shouldn't hit your children. If you want to get your children to behave, we know how to do that. We know that consequences make sense, we know timeout makes sense, and most importantly, we know that positive reinforcement makes sense.
Timeout makes sense?
Yes.
If my parent had told me timeout as a kid, I would laugh at them if they sent me to my room, because that's exactly what I wanted. That is not a punishment for a child, sending them to their room.
Well, it all depends on what's inside their room. But let me go back to what we do know about effective parenting. The one thing we don't pay enough attention to is positive behavior. So positive behavior is always the underdog. We expect kids to sit still. We expect them to behave at the restaurant. We expect them to listen to us. We very rarely ever say, thank you very much for doing as I say. I really appreciate it. What we do, though, is that we do reinforce negative behavior. So if you're not sitting up straight, if you're messing around at the table in a restaurant, we say something to you. So what we know is that there's a science to positive behavior.
What are you saying, though? Are you saying that parents should allow their kids to roam around a restaurant or around a public place and just allow them at will to do whatever they want?
Absolutely not. I think that there's three things they should do. When your kid does something that you want them to do, you actually praise them, you label the praise, you say thank you very much for doing as I say, thank you for being so polite at the table and being so cooperative. When they do insignificant off-task behavior, you should ignore it. If they don't clean up on the first count, you give them 3 or 4 counts before you repeat it.
Doctor, that sounds like it works well in a book, but in practicality, hang on, I know a lot of parents are listening to me. Listen, I'm just playing devil's advocate here. I'm not a parent, but I'm not a parent. I know that you're an expert, but I know that a lot of parents and a lot of people are watching and saying it's easy to say on television, but for practical everyday use, my child doesn't listen to me. My child has disciplinary issues.
No, because they're talking like the Charlie Brown teacher.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm so sorry to cut you off.
So let me just help you with one thing. Let's take the opposite side. There's two things. That one, we do have science and we can prove this works. But more importantly, what do we know about hitting kids? Hitting kids is bad for two reasons. One, you're never really in control when you smack your kid. And number two, it's a model that you don't want your children using. You don't want your kids hitting other people.
But can we talk
you don't
about,
want kids
can we
being
talk about
aggressive
why,
and violent.
why parents are doing
What
this
you
thing?
do when you
But
hit
it's
them
not just,
is
it's not
that
just
you lose control,
I don't think you can
and
hear us
they
'cause the earpiece is
basically
not in.
are having a tough time when they have to learn how to control their emotions.
But we're not just talking about hitting kids. You're saying that you should give them positive reinforcement. But if a kid does something that is not right, you should never tell them that's wrong, don't do it. You should just let them do it and then...
No. I'm saying that when they do insignificant off-task behaviors, wait before you jump on them.
All right, Asadah, I see you're shaking your head. You want to get in there. What?
Yeah, you see me shaking my head over here, yes. Because basically, I mean, you remember Charlie Brown's teacher. Charlie Brown's teacher, what does she sound like, right? That's right. That is what we sound like to young people because we're talking at them. We're not having conversations with them. And so how many of us are asking our daughters or sons at the end of the day, how was school? What did you do? Oh, that's interesting. It's just like we're not validating them. We're not having conversations with them. We're talking at them and giving directives. And it just makes us ineffective because think about yourself as an adult. If I talk to you now and give you directives and talk at you, you're probably going to dislike me and then not talk to me ever again. But you can't do that with your parents. So we need to foster behavior that builds them up and that just changes the way, like we talk to each other. Talk to your child and give them power, give them love, let them feel nurtured.
I want to say one more thing about it, too.
And that's how it works.
Go ahead, Van.
Yeah, well, I mean, first of all, I think that, first of all, both of these are experts. I hope that people at home will read their books, read their work. It's been enlightening for me. I think a lot of what we're seeing, at least in the black community, is what I would call almost preemptive abuse. I've talked to a lot of black parents today, and they say, listen, I feel like if I'm not tough on my kids at home, the police and then the school teachers and society is going to be even tougher on them out in the world. So I'm going to be super tough on my kids here so they're ready for the world. Now, to me, that sounds like preemptive abuse. Well, you're going to be more abusive than society to prepare your kids for society. But this is the kind of attitude. So that's why you hear this football player saying, I thought I was doing a good thing. Then the media jumps on him and says, well, he's just an abuser who's in denial. I think we need to understand people do not have the tools. We don't have the tools to be able to do better parenting.
Look at the pictures, what Adrian Peterson did.
Oh, those pictures are
clearly,
terrible.
The pictures, if he did that, that's abuse. But I think most people would think a spanking is not. You're calling a spanking abuse on television, and that's not necessarily.
So let me just tell you that we know there's
Very
two
quickly.
things that parents are supposed to do. They're supposed to have control, and they're supposed to have warmth.
Okay.
That's what builds the most effective type of kid who's going to be independent. Means that you talk to your kid, you have a lot of communication, but at the end of the day, the kid knows who's in charge. The parent sets the rules.
Thank
and
you,
you can
Doctor.
set rules, and you can keep discipline without hitting your kid.
Thank
There
you,
is
Doctor.
absolutely
Thank you,
no
everyone.
reason
Dr.
for corporal
Kopowitz,
punishment.
Asadah, Kirkland, Van Jones.
His earpiece came out. Thank
Got
you.
it. Thanks so much for that debate.